Hello all, welcome to ROWTYPE. In this session, we'll discuss about the composite data types in PLSQL. Let's get into the objective of this particular session. In this session, we'll understand about how do we use a percentile row type attribute, nothing but the record data type, and also different kind of collection attributes which are available in PLSQL. So composite data types in PLSQL are divided into two types. One is PL by SQL record, we call it as, other one is called collections. So what is the difference between a record and a collection? A record is exactly similar to a database table record, which can hold values of different data types. It can hold different values of different data types. A collection is a group of elements of the same data type. Nothing but, like we'll just see one example, then we can easily clearly understand here. Here, if you observe, this is my employee data. And here there are around couple of records, maybe around, 9 records are there here. And here, if you observe this particular green color highlighted one. Now, let us say when I say record, a record is a group of element. A record is a group of element. Okay. But when you say collection, collection is a group of element. Yes, but they are all of same data type. It's kind of an array, right? When you say array of numbers, or let us say employee numbers, they all belong to same data type. So that's the difference. Like this is called collection. This highlighted portion, this is called, we call it as collection. And this one, the green color one, we call it as record. So let's see it again. Let's read it again. A record is a group of related data items stored in fields, each with its own name and data type. Here, if you observe, the employee was having a record. Each record will have a set of columns. Each column will have a specific name as well as data type as well as a specific value it will have it. That's the difference. Coming to the collection, it's an order group of element, all of the same type, right? That same type can be a single employee. What you say, like it can be a single column or it can be a group of columns also. Okay, that's a little bit different between a record and a collection. We'll see an example, then we can get more clarity also. And here, if you observe the PL by SQL, when you deal with PL by SQL record, we mostly use row type kind of attribute, or also we can declare our own kind of data type also. Let's see that. So what is a PL by SQL record? We know what is database table record. And similarly, PL by SQL record, what we generally do is we declare a data type, okay? And using that, we can assign a value. So that's that's the only difference in the PL by SQL record logic. Now here, if you observe, how do we create a PL by SQL record in Oracle? So we have to create our own user-defined data type. This is called user-defined data type because this data type, what we are creating, it is available. It is created by developer, right? It is not provided by Oracle. That's why it is called user-defined data type. When you create a user-defined data type using a keyword called type, that's where it will come into picture. So like, let us see one example here. So now I'll just show you one example of record data type. Here, if you observe, I just created a simple program, record sample, and I have a declared keyword. Here I've defined a user-defined data type, a developer-defined data type, I can say. The type is a keyword followed by the data type name. This is a data type name, not a variable. It's kind of, like we are defining our own data type. Like let's say when you want to declare any variable in PLSQL, what we do, v underscore employee empid number. So this number is Oracle predefined data type, but here this emp type is a user-defined data type which can hold two values. One is number and another one is varchar. So then this one, line number 5, I'm declaring a variable which is belonging to data type emp type. So this nothing but what I can do, I can make use of this particular record variable to hold two values, but I have to mention the column name. Here, if you observe, I just wrote an implicit cursor which is fetching only one record with two columns. And these two columns, I just mentioned the variable name directly. I doesn't need to explicitly mention the column name here. But when I want to fetch it, I have to explicitly mention here. So here, if you observe what I mentioned the employee ID and first name. Let us say I just want to fetch the salary also. What I can do, I'll just mention a column name called salary. This column name can be anything. It doesn't need to match with the it doesn't need to match with the value which the column name of your database table from which you are fetching. Okay, it's not only that you need to get the value and store in the record variable. You can do it anyway. Okay, I can simply store like this also. Let us say v underscore emp underscore record that salary is equal to 1500. I can store the value like this also. Okay, let's try to print it. But if you want to print any value from the record variable, you have to suffix the column name for sure, else it will not work. Okay, now let's say I'll just try to print the salary, and this has to print 1500. Okay, let's execute this one. Okay, and it is giving some error. Let's see what is the error. Okay, so the reason here, if you observe, it is saying that or are too many values. But the problem was here, if you observe line, we added one more column in the salary here, one more column in the data type, but you're trying to fetch only two columns, so it could not identify these two columns should be stored where, right? Then if that is the case, if there is a mismatch between the data which you are fetching from select query to your record variable, then explicitly mention the column name so that it will understand clearly, okay, where you want to store the appropriate value. So then what I'll do is I'll just change this one, and let's see what will happen now. Compile. Perfect, right? So now it was able to identify, okay, yeah, I understand that, like you want to fetch these set of values and you explicitly mention to which column you want to assign. I can just change this particular one logic a little bit now. Let us say I'll copy this logic, but I don't want to mention the explicit column names, right? So what I do, I don't want to mention all this like this. What I can do is, if the list of values or the list of column values which you are fetching from your query, if it that matches the exact set of things which you mention your particular record variable, yes, perfectly it will work. Now if you observe, this will fetch all the three columns values into this emp record, and you can mention them one by one like this. Observe here, right? So earlier the salary was 1500. Let's see what is the salary of now. The salary is 12008, right? So this is how we can make use of the type variable in PLSQL. So there are a number of ways you'll find it. There are a number of syntaxes you'll find it. Okay. This is one more sample in the similar one. And coming to the interesting one, percentile row type. Okay. So earlier we have seen how do we use percentile type for which we use it for the purpose of defining a variable of a particular database column type. And this is about defining a variable which is of a table record data type. So here, if you observe, what is the syntax of this one is this, nothing but a variable name. And here we just need to mention the reference is nothing but your particular table, and the row type is a keyword we have to mention. Now, what I'll do is I'll just create one more program. So, oops, it went some other way, man. Yeah, this SQL developer, it is behaving weird way every time. Okay, let's try. Oh, very, very dangerous. 1 minute. Okay, let me close this first. Okay, this seems okay. Yeah, fine. So I'll just remove this. Now I just want to show a sample using percentile row type, right? Declare begin end. Now let's say v underscore empiric. What is our table name? Employees percentile row type, right? That's a syntax, right? Employee identifier reference percentile row type. That's it. Now what I'll do is I just want to fetch only one record. Okay, select star into v underscore empiric from employees. If you are trying to fetch more than one record, this will not work because implicit cursor can handle only one record at a time. I'll just say row num less than 2. Okay, now just execute this one. Perfect, it got executed, but we want to see the values, right? What you can do, output underscore line. Now if you want to retrieve the values from this particular record variable, you have to explicitly mention the column name, right? v underscore emp record dot employee. Similarly, you can mention all the column names. Let's mention one more column name. So the advantage of this particular one is it doesn't need to explicitly mention all the column names, but the disadvantage is that, like let us say you want to retrieve only 5 columns, but if we are trying to fetch 100 columns, it's of no use, right? So always you have a pros and cons when you're using the different set of syntaxes, right? Now the employee is 256 and name is z1 underscore new, right? So this is how we can make use of record variable. Okay. I mean percentile row type, sorry, percentile row type, you can use that way. Now coming to the interesting part. So far we have discussed about how do we make use of record data type. Now we'll deal about collection. So in collection, there are 3 things: associative arrays, nested tables or nested arrays, and V arrays. So more or less the functionality which is provided by all the 3 are same. But what exactly the difference between these three of them is, one is the syntax, one is the little bit of functionality difference, and there are some set of functions which are available in appropriate collections. It could be different, and the memory functionality, how it works, little bit different, and the initialization is also a little bit different. Okay, so pretty much all of them has the same functionality, but it depends upon situation, functionality, memory allocation. You have to deal with the appropriate one. So let's start with the syntax of the first two, associative array and nested table. So the only difference between the associative array and nested table here, if you observe, is like in the associative array, we have to explicitly mention index by appropriate integer or char. So we require an index for associative array because the concept of associative array is similar to hash map or hash table concept in the other programming languages. Coming to nested table, you don't have the index by concept here. It is just a simple array of values where you can use it. Let's see some examples of associative array and nested table. Before that, we can also discuss VARRAY. So VARRAY is almost similar concept. The only thing is VARRAY is much, like it always thinks about memory, right? So if VARRAY should be used when you know that like you want to store only 30 records, or if you know the size of the array, then only you have to use VARRAY. Else VARRAY is not a preferred choice at all. So the best choice always is the first one, associative array. Because VARRAY, like when you're dealing with in a normal real world program, so how can you be sure that like how many records you have on a particular employee table, right? We are not sure. But of course, this is our advantage when you're dealing with some kind of memory constraint related functionalities, then you have to go with VARRAY. So let's see the associative array example. So in the associative array example here, if you observe, first thing what we have done is in the declared section, we just declared a type. It's a user defined type, and we just mentioned table of varchar2, nothing but this particular data type, this particular table, we are declaring an array of varchars. That's what it's all about. It's nothing but array of employees or array of salaries, array of hire dates, array of invoices, right? So this particular one, what are we trying to do is it will have array of varchars. There is no limit how many values you can have it. So here if you observe, we just mentioned the index. So in PLSQL, the index starts with 1. In Java, it starts with 0. In C language also, it starts with 0. In most of the languages, it starts with 0. In some other, it starts with 1. In PLSQL, it starts with 1. So what are we doing? We're just assigning a value for first index, similarly for second index, and then we are trying to loop it. Here, if you observe, I can just simply loop it and get the value. Okay, let's copy the simple example, and we'll try to get some understanding from this one. Okay, I'll just copy here. Okay, so let us analyze this one. So here, if you observe in the declared section, we declared a type array of is a table of varchar indexed by binary integer, and then here this is in the third line. What are we doing? We are creating a variable of type. Then the second line, we are creating a data type. In third line, we are creating a variable. And line number 5 and 6, we are assigning values, right? So then simply execute this one. It has to print this particular first and second. Let us say I want to have a third value. Then what I can do? Simply, you can just assign like this, right? I'll just mention 3. It will work, right? It should work. Okay, so it says some issue because, oh, sorry, I mentioned 4 here, right? That's the issue. I'll tell you what is the reason also. Now, so if you observe 1, 2, 3, it got printed perfectly. But let us say now what I'll do is assume that I'll mention 5 here. I'll mention 5 here. So logically it is correct, but as per the associative array logic, it will not work. So it will give some kind of issue. Let's see what is that. Execute this one, and it says that no data found from the objects. So what it is trying to do is it knows that what is the size of it. So this associative array know that the size of the array. So when it's trying to find out the value at index 4, it could not print that. That is why it's saying no data found issue. So in the associative array, you can assign a value at any index. It doesn't bother about that. But when you're trying to fetch that, make sure that you mention the index and then retrieve the value accordingly. So that's the concept of associative array. Okay. Now let's see the another sample. Coming to the nested array. So the only difference here, if you observe in the nested array or nested table concept, is here you don't have the index by concept. And also here you have an extra thing called you have to initialize explicitly. You have to initialize your nested array, then only you can make use of that. And here if you observe, we just mentioned. And so one more important thing you have to mention is like when you are trying to, once you initialize, you need to mention how many values you want to have it. Now let's consider the same example. in the nested array fashion. I'll just say, I'll execute this one. And yes, I was able to get 1, 2, 3. So what we have done, we declared a variable of, we declared a user defined data type, declared a variable. Then I mentioned extend. So here this particular one, right? So you need to mention your variable name followed by the data type which you have used for that variable. That so this is kind of a constructor concept. So this is kind of a constructor concept in Java, or I can say we are just allocating a memory for this variable. That's what I can say, or a pointer if you are aware of pointer concept in C language. So then what we are trying to do is we are using this variable dot extend 3, nothing but this variable can hold 3 values of this data type which was mentioned here. Okay. Now first, second, third, that's fine. Now let's say I want to have fifth one. I want to have fourth one. Let's go with fourth first of all. Fourth, and see what will happen now. Let's see what will happen now. Right? It says that in limit subscript was greater than the count of VARRAY or too large kind of thing. It says some kind of issue. Now, what is the solution for this one is, see, when you're trying to assign values, so make sure that you extend appropriately. You just need to extend it, right? Now let's try again. Correct. So you simply got the fourth one. It doesn't need to mention the size when you're extending, right? It doesn't need to mention that. Let us say if I mention extend of 10 and see what is the value, it will print for count. So where is the count? Let's try to print the count also, then we'll understand more. Let's say dbms underscore output underscore line count of nested array. Okay, now then value of the nested array is saying 13. Why? Because initially it got extended with 3 and later it extended with 10, 13 it printed, and let's see what are the values it is trying to print. So here if you observe it printed 4, but after that I'm not sure whether it printed or not printed because we don't have the proper logging mechanism, right? Let's say I'll just mention I value, okay? Then we'll understand whether it is iterating that number of times or not, right? Okay. Now let's see. Okay, so here if you observe, after fourth, all the values were empty, okay, and it is allowing us to extend, right? And so the basic concept here is, first of all, when you want to deal with nested array, you have to initialize it, and you have to extend whenever you want to allocate whenever you want to assign a value. Okay, that's how we can deal it. So you cannot mention an index if that particular index is not initialized. I mean to say, now let us say so far we have 13 indexes, right? You cannot assign a value at 15th unless you extend it properly. So that's a extend this particular nested array concept. More or less pretty much same. Only difference is you'll have a little bit different syntax. Okay. And similar example. So coming to the VArray. So VArray is almost similar to your nested array, but here a little bit again is syntactical difference you'll come across. So you just need to initialize it, right? And then you have to extend it. So, but what is the difference between VArray and nested array here if you observe, right? So in the nested array, what we mentioned, we have mentioned nested, sorry, extend. I mean, declare the data type first of all, and then you mentioned extend. And here, while declaring the data type of nested array, you never mention what is the size of it. You have not mentioned the size of the appropriate nested array. But coming to VArray here, if you observe, when we are declaring the VArray, we clearly mention type VArray is VArray, and we mention the size there. That's the difference of VArray as well as nested table. So now here, if you observe this example, at any point of time, we can hold only 3 values because we mention the size. It will not allow you to extend more than that. So now, if you compare all these 3 things, the best one is always the nested or maybe associative array, right? So that's a overall understanding of this particular one. So the only thing is always try to understand whether you're using a nested one or associative array. So the only difference between associative and nested one is, in the associative you have to mention index by. In the nested you don't have index by. Because of that you have to explicitly mention initialization class, as well as you have to extend whenever you want to allocate it. But coming to associative array, there is no limit. It doesn't need to mention any explicit index by, it doesn't need to mention any extend every time. It doesn't need to initialize it. You can just assign the value wherever you want at any index. Okay, but retrieving also make sure that you mention the appropriate index, else it will get into error. So these are the concept of these particular things, but we'll get into more samples when we deal with the bulk concept, where you use all these particular different complex data type when you are trying to deal with bulk data, bulk kind of bulk data concepts. Okay. So yeah, so this is one of the simple example of, like index by sample, which we already discussed. Yeah, similar examples here if you observe. So type emp type a table of number indexed by binary integer, and then we declared a variable emp array variable emp type. So what we are trying to do here, if you observe carefully, so we are just simply assigning one particular column in each particular index, right? Just a simple one. And most of these particular array collections, whatever you have it, you have these different set of methods like count, size, length, delete. There are a lot number of things you'll come across. Just explore them. Like these are some of the table methods which I was telling, right? Access, count, first, last, these all things you can explore them. So the major thing is try to understand about record concept, deal with deal with the number of samples so that you'll get more clarity. And collections, yeah, don't try to understand all the things at a time, just work on one sample at a time, then you can easily explore. So what we have done so far is like we just understood about record variables and PLSQL and collections, which are three types: associative array, nested array, and VARRAY. So each of them have similar functionality, but it deals, I mean, the set of methods and the memory related information between all of them differs. Thank you.